What is the strangest thing you've seen that you cannot explain? My youngest daughter would always beg to buy the seasonal decorations when we'd go shopping. She passed away from a brain tumor when she was 5, and as a way to cope I started buying those seasonal decorations and now decorate my house with them as the seasons and holidays change. Her favorite were these colorful birds from Target. A couple of years ago, just before Easter, I was deep cleaning the house. One of the Easter birds went missing. I assumed one of my older kids had knocked it off the shelf with their backpack as they had left for school that morning. I looked around where it should have fallen, but couldn't find it. We had a younger dog who loved to chew up everything he could find. I checked all his usual hiding spots, but couldn't find it. I continued to clean the house, vacuum, dust, full top to bottom cleaning of the common areas of the house, since I was home alone for the day. Finally I'm done and still haven't found that bird. I found a lot of missing socks, Legos, and other crap. I grab my cleaning stuff and say out loud, "Daughter, it's okay if you're playing with it, but will you let me know somehow so that I know the dog didn't destroy it?" I walk out of the living room and put the cleaning stuff away under the kitchen sink. I come back into the living room and there that bird is. It is standing on its feet in the center on the living room floor. These birds have pipe cleaner like feet, so they were difficult to get to stand right, and it is standing on its feet. I got a chill. I picked it up and looked it over. There weren't anything teeth marks or slobber, so it hadn't been in the dog's mouth. I just said, "Thanks daughter. You're welcome to play with it whenever you want," and put it back on the shelf. I have no way to explain it other than the paranormal. Not exactly seen, but it's strange. I was around 6, and on Wednesday evening I went to bed. I woke up, and it was Friday. I remember asking my mom, "Why is it Friday when yesterday it was Wednesday?" She said yesterday was Thursday, obviously. I asked her what I did on Thursday because the last thing I remember is going to sleep on Wednesday. She named some activities and I remembered none of that. I never found out why I don't remember the Thursday. This happened to my friend a couple of weeks ago. Hers were caused by medication that she sometimes took, but this time she completely blacked out and woke up days later. During that time she apparently woke up, did chores around the house, and talked to people, but she only remembers going to sleep and then waking up 2 days later. It was super weird. Not only that a medicine she took before had this effect, but it also never happened again. Living in a dorm, no roommate. Night before 2-hour open book final. I put my book in the middle of the floor, so I'll stumble over it on the way out. The floor has nothing else on it. In the morning it's gone. I look all over the room, can't find it. I think I'm hysterically blind, so I feel over every inch of the floor with my hands. Nothing. I go get a cup of coffee and come back, still nothing. By now there's only 1 hour for the test. I go anyway, and do the best I can. Naturally when I get back the book is in the middle of the floor exactly where I put it. Probably a prank, but how? I'm not that heavy a sleeper. Nobody took credit for it. Something so similar happened to me too. I lost an important piece of paper right after bringing it home. Looked everywhere. After 2 weeks I decided I'd call the company and have a copy sent. I walked into the kitchen the day I planned to call and pulled a lunch container out of the fridge. I went into the living room to grab my phone and came back to the kitchen to microwave my lunch. The missing paper was sitting on top of my lunch container. Writing this out is giving me serious creeps all over again. I'm all shaky. For about 10 years a man would call my home, ask for me, and then ask me if my feet were ticklish. This was 30 or so years ago, no caller ID or anything like that. I would engage him if my family was home. If I said my feet were ticklish he'd ask me to ask the person sitting closest to me to tickle them. He always hung up before we could ask questions to figure him out. Sometimes he'd get me on a payphone. Like, I'd be walking home from school and a payphone would ring. It was always him. Still don't know who it was. So in 2013, I was smoking a cig with my buddy and his schizophrenic neighbor in Denton, Texas. This neighbor was the nice kind of off, never acting mean or violent. So we were actually pretty good friends. Anyway, during the middle of the cig, the neighbor acts like he just got hit with an energy wave and runs out into the yard. he begins to start rhythmically dancing and chanting about the meteor. What I could understand was that he felt the meteor, and he said that he felt it falling, and then with a final jerk, he said the meteor had exploded. At that same time, on the other side of the world, an enormous meteor exploded over Russia. If you are wondering, no, there was no advanced warning. And yes, part of me does suspect that he somehow knew. Years ago, when my wife was pregnant with our second child and about to give birth, my mom came to stay with us for a few days to help take care of our oldest child. One early evening, mom asked for a pen, paper and an envelope. When I gave them to her, she wrote on the paper, sealed it in the envelope, and gave it to me, saying, "Put this in your pocket and don't open it. You'll know when," she said. 30 minutes later, my wife announced it was time to go to the hospital. She was in labor. So we did, and about 9 hours later our second daughter was born at 3:45 am. She weighed 8 pounds, 11 ounces and was 20 inches long. This being pre-cell phone days, I called my mom from the hospital to tell her the news. She answered the phone and immediately said, "Before you say anything, open the envelope." I did. It said, "Girl 3:45 am 8 pounds, 11 ounces 20 inches. I kept that paper for years. When my mom died, I went to our document safe where we kept it, but it was gone." As a full-grown adult, I was telling my mother about this house I was in with a dream I had. It was brown, had 2 bedrooms, 2 floors, L-shaped stairs. I went into full detail about this house from my dream. Anyway, apparently the house I described was the house I was born in. Not like, born. I was born in a hospital, but the house my family lived in for 2 years prior to my birth, that we all moved out of when I was 7 or 8 months old. At first I thought maybe my brain got it from pictures I had seen, but honestly the level of detail wasn't shown in any pictures we had of me at such a young age. Mostly they were close-ups, so you couldn't really see the background much. Best guess to this day is my brain picking up really old and obscure memories. Other than that, I'm not sure how TF I knew anything about this house, let alone the layout, furniture setup, etc. It wasn't what I saw so much as felt. I was on my way to Petersburg, a small island in Alaska, but the runway was too foggy, so I had to stay in Juneau at a hotel for the night. Anyway, the next morning I was sleeping and had my hand dangling in between the bed and the wall, and I swear on everything I felt something grabbed my hand. It had a grip like a very firm handshake and it literally woke me up out of a dead sleep. I actually got up and checked under the bed and nothing was there. It was very weird. I was taking a trip with my then girlfriend, and we had to cross the Hudson River to get to where we were going. There are only a handful of bridges across, and I know them all from having grown up in the area. On that particular trip we were supposed to take the Bear Mountain Bridge, but I got off the wrong exit and passed it. We decided it wasn't a big deal. The next bridge, the Newborough Beacon, was actually closer to where we were going. It would just bring us over a little bit past our destination, but not enough to really matter. So we kept on driving, not really paying specific attention to where we were, since it was probably 20-30 minutes until we got there. Well, we never crossed the Newborough Beacon that day. We also never crossed the Bear Mountain. And we certainly didn't drive an extra half an hour to the mid-Hudson or turn around and go back to the tap. When we did take a minute to check where we were and how close the bridge was, we found we were already on the other side of the river. No bridge, we were just already there. So either there's a secret tunnel somewhere under the river, we had our memories erased, or we found some kind of spatial rift somewhere in the Hudson Valley. Had something very similar happen about 18 years ago. A friend and I were driving what would normally be a 3-hour drive. A little way in, we hit the heaviest rain/lightning storm I've ever driven through. I was driving about half the speed limit and could barely make out the car in front of us. When that car pulled over, clearly wasn't confident driving in that weather. I drove on for about 15-20 minutes before also pulling over as we passed a small town. The rain eased off and we continued on our way. When we got home, according to our phone/the wall clock in the house/the car clock, the trip had taken less than 2 hours. We had somehow shaved a whole hour off the trip by going almost half speed for most of the way. Was driving home from work one afternoon with my brother and cousin in the car. As we were sitting in traffic, I noticed high up in the sky and way out in the distance a small motionless black square. I pointed it out, and both my brother and my cousin spotted it quickly, so I know it wasn't in my head. It just remained still for about 45 minutes, and then the sun had set, and it was too dark to spot it any longer. It just stayed in the exact same spot the whole time, and while it was really far away you could still tell it was a perfect square shape. Once I got home I went online to see if there were any mentions of it anywhere, and there was nothing. To this day I still think about it and wonder WTF I was looking at. I was driving away from a gas station. Out of nowhere a guy in a suit comes running up to my minivan and starts yanking the door. As if he knew me, he began pleading, "Simon, let me in." Luckily my doors were locked. I asked him who the hell he was through my window. He looked genuinely surprised that I wouldn't let him in. After I refused to let him in, his facial expression inverted, as if he just realized something horrible. He let go of my car, said something to the effect of, "You're one of them, aren't you?" Then he ran away behind the gas station and into the woods. Full suit and tie, nice shoes, extremely frantic in nature, zero explanation. I'm praying it was some elaborate troll or meth or something, because the look in that man's eyes was pure terror when I didn't let him in. My 3-year-old daughter walked up to my husband one night and straight up said, "Grandpa's dead." Few moments later we get a call from my husband's sister saying that their father had passed away. Happened a few months back. Still creeps me out. I feel like the 3 and underage can be super creepy. When my son was not even 3, yet he came to my room and kept telling me the lady was in his and his sister's room. I was half asleep and dismissed it, told him to snuggle up in my bed with me. So he got in my bed, but every few minutes kept waking me up to tell me about the lady. Then he says she is at my bedroom door. So in an effort to show him there is no lady and we should just go back to sleep, I pick him up and walk him in the dark out of my room. We stand in the hall and I say, "See, there is no lady." He points his finger down the hall where there is nothing to see at all and says, "Mama, she's right there. That's the lady. And this is her house." Nothing, not even a shadow where he was pointing. I kind of just tried not to show he was freaking me out and said, "Okay, she must be a nice lady," and took him back to my bed where he promptly fell asleep, and I stayed awake for hours thinking this lady in my 100+ year old apartment must be hanging out watching me sleep. I was in rap when I was in college. All the RAs would come back a week before the winter semester started for training, which meant no students were back in the dorms. We were the only ones in the building. One night, I heard the door to my shared bathroom open. The sound of the door knob turning woke me up, so I kind of groggily said my suitemate's name. She would sometimes come through the bathroom to talk or ask me for advice. Then I realized my suitamate was on an extended holiday in Italy, so no one should have been in our suite at all. I immediately shot up and looked toward the bathroom door. It was almost pitch black in my room, but next to the bathroom door, I could see the perfect outline of a human face wearing a flat-brimmed hat. I couldn't see the details of the face, but I could see shadows where the eyes, mouth, and nose would have been. It was as if someone was standing next to the door, staring at me. I had no idea what to do, because no one was back in the dorms. I knew that the nearest RA was 2 floors away, and wouldn't hear me scream for help. I stared at the face for a few seconds, and it stared back. Then I shifted slightly on the bed and it completely disappeared. I got up to check the door, and it had been closed the whole time. It's been almost 7 years and it still freaks me out when I think about it. Went hiking late at night with my buddy when something big and bright flew right over us above the tree line. It was so bright we couldn't even look at it, and whatever it was, it didn't make a sound. Actually, it was probably the most quiet moment of my life. I remember saying "what the fuck?" but no sound came out of my mouth. Only lasted a few seconds, and it was over. I've seen meteors that lit up the whole sky almost like day, but were so high you couldn't hear them. I used to work nights. It was a fairly simple job, and I was pretty much alone in an abandoned building. I was basically security, to prevent people from coming in, and clearing people out, if there were any. Occasionally you get some teens hanging about, the odd homeless person or some YouTubers filming, but nothing out of the ordinary. I understand that the night and your brain can play tricks on you in the dark and when you're tired, but I don't know how to explain what I saw, and I'm sure there is a logical explanation for it. I just went into a room. It was pretty much empty. I saw 3 shadows on the wall, but there was nothing to explain how the 3 human shadows were there. It was just really creepy, and I got really bad vibes. So I just went out, and I saw a very tall, slim, not of this world figure on the other end of the hallway. So that was me done. I know there's probably a reasonable explanation for it, but it was certainly unexplainable at the time. I think this is just a coincidence, but it's weird nonetheless. I can summon, I don't know a better word for it, a boy to message me. It's one specific boy who was a close friend when we were 12 to 13. Once we left to go to high school, we kinda lost touch. I think about messaging him sometimes, and usually within 10 minutes I'll get a message from him. It's really bizarre, and it only happens with this one dude. Once we didn't talk for a year, and then he messaged me randomly after I thought about reaching out. I asked him why he messaged, and he said that he felt a weird feeling wash over him, and it's like it pushed him to message me. It's really bizarre, although probably just a coincidence. I was once standing in line at Target. A mother and her, I guess, 3-year-old were in front of me in the checkout lane. I never met them before in my life. The child was riding in the shopping cart and the mother went forward to better unload it. The child looks dead at me, smiles, laughs and said my first name, very clearly, twice. I have an uncommon first name, which made it even stranger. Edit. No, we didn't have name tags. Just blank white keycards for entering locked areas. The dress code was strictly professional suit and tie. On weekends, I never was into being some company's walking billboard. A week before my twin brother died, I was in the passenger side of the car under awful thought with visuals that popped in my mind. I was at his house, and it was empty. His door was shut, but I had an overwhelming feeling he was no longer alive. It was the first time I've cried over just a thought. I also had him visit me in a dream after and ask where he was, and he didn't know he was dead. Yet I showed him his death certificate and all the paperwork my mom was filling out. I can't explain it, but seeing that a week ahead helped me process his death better than my siblings and mom. His 10 years is coming up in March and I've been trying to dream about him, no luck. Me and a buddy were at his house watching TV and some person on the screen was eating a strawberry. I don't really care for them, but it looked good, and I asked if, by chance, he had any strawberries in the house. He almost laughed at me. We were two 20-year-olds with a higher chance of beer or mac and cheese or Fruit Loops than strawberries. About 20 minutes later, there's a knock at the door and he goes to answer it. He yells out to me to come see something. His mom is standing at the door with one of those low-cut boxes with a bunch of strawberries. He said, "Tell him what you said." She looks a little strange and says, "I was driving home and there was a guy selling strawberries out of the back of his truck and I thought, I bet David and his friends would like some strawberries." My buddy says, "Well, you blew it. We all have one wish and you wasted yours on strawberries." My family used to travel between Utah and Nevada a few times a year when I was growing up. We often saw wildlife on the side of the road or crossing the road. There's one thing that still baffles all of us, though. It was in the middle of the day, on a long hot empty stretch of road. I was a teen. Myself, my mom, and a couple of my siblings saw something scurry across the road. It looked like a huge egg, the size of an ostrich egg, maybe larger, with 2 skinny legs and feet poking out the bottom of it. We cannot figure out what it possibly could have been. 4 Amish men in a room counting money with a money counter while simultaneously weighing out my ounce of weed. Just wasn't what I was expecting. Back in the 80s an Amish run drug ring was broken up near me. Said ring would actually cross the border into Canada, smuggling their product in their buggies. I still remember a Canadian border guard testifying they never searched their vehicles because they were Amish and couldn't conceive of them doing something illegal. I was dating a girl years ago and she left my house one night after hanging out to go home. She called my house about 10 minutes later. She'd curbed her car trying to not hit a dog that looked like a ghost. I was annoyed, thought she was full of it, helped her unlock her steering wheel, and she was on her way. Years later, I was riding with a completely separate / unrelated girlfriend, and I was looking down at some CDS in my lap to try and figure out what to play next. Out of the blue she yells fuck, and then she locks the brakes up, and we slide to a stop. I asked, WTF are you doing? And she responded, did you not see that dog run right in front of us? It looked like a ghost wolf. I looked around, and sure enough we are right around the same spot where my previous girlfriend had also seen this ghost canine/wolf thing, which freaked me out once that clicked. So while I technically never saw it myself, the inexplicable, ethereal canine freaked out 2 different GFS of mine, and none of us have a clue as to what it actually was. I once saw someone who looked and dressed exactly like me, with my mannerisms and posture, standing outside a pub I had visited only a week earlier around the same time in the evening. He was finishing a smoke, and went back inside a few seconds, after I'd been able to notice and get a good look at him. I smoked at the time as well, so it was something I'd have been doing. Not sure if I saw a glimpse of my own past from a third person perspective, or what, or if I just have a twin somewhere in Dublin. My dad, sister and I all saw something that wasn't an animal and wasn't human. This was in winter 2015 in rural Saskatchewan. We were driving, and it ran out in front of us on the road. It was so fast it was a dark blur, but we all agree we saw long gangly limbs like a deer, but it had human looking arms and legs. We still talk about it. A long time ago, when I was in preschool, school had just ended, and I was the first one, adult or child, at the exit, which was a tall gate with one of those C-shaped latches that slips over a pole to keep the gate shut. I walked up to it and reached for the latch, but alas, I was very small and the latch was at least 3 feet above me. I stepped back and decided to just wait for the adults to come set me free, but then the latch just lifted and the gate opened. I saw it clearly. There was nobody around and no one touched it. Still have no idea what that could've been. Childhood telekinesis. Who knows? When me and my best friend were teenagers, we were walking home during the wee hours of the morning when a drunk guy basically acted like we knew him and invited us to eat. For some reason, we actually came with him, and we ate at this 24/7 joint, where he told us about his adventures around the world, showed pictures, etc. We hung out until it was around 5 AM, and walked home together. I have no idea who he fucking was. I still don't. A very badass Great Dane I knew, a former neighbor's dog, was so afraid of a month-old kitten that he ran into the deepest room of his home and didn't stop quivering and whimpering for several hours. For context, he wasn't a timid dog. Little over a month before the mentioned incident, a drunk man attempted to break into their home at night and the dog bit half of his left foot off. P.S. Rest in peace, Scoob. Didn't happen to me but my mom. She was going through a tough patch, not making a lot of money. Single mom with 2 kids. Was stressed over bills, but had just enough to cover them. Unfortunately it left us with no money. She was a hard worker and would do multiple shifts at the hospital. Still it was hard this particular month. She was sweeping and prayed for help. As she turned around to empty the dustbin into the trash, there was a crisp $100 bill perfectly laying on top of the filled trash can. No one lived at our house with us. She was never able to explain it.